Peace and greetings, people from around the world, all the network of awareness supporters on social media and on the podcast platforms, whether it be Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker. And if you haven't joined on Spreaker, definitely subscribe. Spreaker is our publisher account. So wherever you listen on your favorite platform, definitely subscribe to Spreaker anyway, because that way you'll be updated on the live episodes that are put out right before they come out. And all you have to do is sign up with an email. So welcome to today's show. And this episode is Legacy of Lies series episode. And it's in regards to the manipulation of algorithms and censorship in the digital age. And this is something we've covered before when we did the virtual governments, which is big tech. And we're really going to dive deep into the dark side of big tech. So welcome to this episode. And because this thing with the algorithms is something that this network is battling against. And since I'm bringing it up now in the beginning of this episode, for those that really support this network, anybody that listens to the Network of Awareness podcast, definitely share this episode and this podcast wherever you can on your social media handles, on your platforms, whether it be your YouTube channels or your regular social media handles or any sites that you are in association with or listening to. Share this wherever you can, because we're going to go into how they manipulate algorithms, but we have to collectively come together to share information to disrupt the algorithm and create a new algorithm. And it's really through it's kind of like a grassroots thing where, just like in grassroots organizations, word of mouth and street walking and talking is the way to really get the word out and to promote. And it's no different than when platforms like mine get shadow banned a lot. So the algorithm is not really supporting this podcast for it to be presented in front of many listeners. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's done purposely, but we can overcome it because there's plenty of people that have experienced what I've experienced and have overcome. It just takes some time, but it takes effort for people to not only comment on these shows, but when they're posted on social media, spreading that algorithm in social media as well, and really just getting people to know that these episodes and this network exists, so that way they can download and subscribe and follow on the different platforms, and that way it grows. And they can't really stop it once that happens on major scales. But there is a censorship. There is something called shadow banning, and we're going to discuss some of these things, because the manipulation of algorithms by big tech companies on social media, podcasts, and streaming platforms, it's something that has been in effect for quite some time now, especially ever since the scandemic, or also known as the pandemic, has come out. Major, and that's when I started the podcast, major censorship. There's been an impact on content quality, and it's really hurt the diversity of voices that have something to say and access to just valuable information. And we're going to emphasize that today. So let's talk about the algorithmic manipulation. And let's go into the definition of algorithmic manipulation. And then I'm going to also go into some articles today here on the Network of Awareness. We haven't done that in a while. But let's talk about algorithmic manipulation. And first, before we go into algorithmic manipulation, polarization. Now, the definition of polarization, which is very interesting, there's two definitions according to Oxford Language. The first one is division into two sharply contrasting groups of sets of opinions or beliefs. So the example is the polarization of society between the rich and poor. Now, the second one is very interesting because this is more of a technical term, but it's according to physics, which I find very interesting considering that we're all spiritual beings of light. It says the action of restricting the vibration of a transverse wave, light, especially light, wholly and partially to one direction. So basically, they can restrict the vibration of light to go in a certain direction and not another direction. Isn't that interesting? And we're going to cover some articles about how social media through algorithmic manipulation is getting very much polarized, especially when it comes to politics. So let's go into these definitions of algorithmic manipulation. And the first thing I'm going to do here, let's pull it up here because I had to look it up here. It says the act of manipulating digital information through the use of computer algorithms. What is algorithm manipulation? Well, in social media, algorithms are rules, signals, and data that govern the platform's operation. These algorithms determine how content is filtered, ranked, selected, and recommended to users. In some ways, algorithms influence our choices and we see on what we see in social media. Very interesting. Now, let's go into this brief article about what are social media algorithms and how they can be manipulated. Algorithms influence the content we see when they're online. There are digital instructions or rules that social media platforms and feeds operate by. While algorithms can improve our online experience, learning from our interest and behavior to show us what we most likely to engage with, many having also come under severe criticism for serving users negative, offensive, and harmful content. Now, this has come into sharper focus during the Molly Russell inquest, where a young girl took her own life after exposure to self-harm and suicide-related posts on her Instagram and Pinterest feeds. And that was an unfortunate event. And there was many, not just with Molly Russell, but there was many others that basically committed suicide online, on their Facebook page, on their Instagram, on TikTok. And a lot of these suicides were able to stay online for quite some time before they were taken down. And the amount of views that these suicide or online suicides got was astronomical, in my opinion. And it's quite sad that we live in a society that behaves in this way, where we find suicide to be somewhat entertaining and interesting. Now, the article goes on to say, as well as users potentially influenced by platforms' algorithms, individuals and groups are also increasingly finding ways to use and manipulate algorithms for themselves to spread their own, sometimes harmful messages. And you see, people are learning how to do this. That's why we have to stick together when it comes to truth formation, which I like to call it, which is truth information. But anything that's helpful, that's going to benefit us collectively and individually, which that's what the network of awareness is all about. It's about exposing the lies so that we can better understand the truth and live within that truth, because we have the power to do whatever we want. We have the power to be whatever we want. And we have to be righteous with the information that's going to help people in a positive manner and not a negative one. And that's why it's so important to share this type of information. And all it takes is a little bit of effort from everyone. So I hope that this message hits home so that after this episode is done, this platform, this network, this podcast radio station can be on your mind for you to say, you know what, let me take the initiative to start spreading this and manipulating the algorithms to work in our favor instead of the malevolent forces that just want to promote radical, disgusting, unthought-provoking, misguided, false information as the populace, and especially the dumbed down, low vibration energy that many of these videos and posts on social media get, as well as the podcasts that, not that I'm criticizing, but there's a lot of podcasts out there that are all about drama and gossip, and those seem to get the most attention. And I know this because even though there wasn't no drama, just the episode that I did with my guest, which was Hadassah Israel, it started getting a lot of attention. Why? Because it's exposing something that creates some form of drama and is some form of perceived as gossip or drama. And it's like, oh, did you hear this? Did you hear that? And that seems to get people's attention instead of something that's going to help them spiritually grow. And this is where we have to shift the state of consciousness by manipulating manipulating the algorithms to get people to start seeing information that they weren't aware of, that they're not even aware of that they need until they receive it. And then hopefully will be ready to apply it. So now this article goes on to say that the data we provide interacting with platforms and websites or via cookies downloaded as we browse online give their algorithms information on everything: where we live, our favorite artists, our hobbies, interests, political preferences, or ideal holiday destinations. And by gathering information about us, algorithms can predict what kinds of content, advertisements, and service recommendations we are most likely to read, watch, buy, or share. This underpins the business models for many social platforms. It is a platform's best interest to keep us as users involved in scrolling by showing posts we're inclined to interact with. While this can definitely bring some benefits, introducing us to content which is relevant, entertaining, or interesting, it can also amplify the more negative sides of online life. Now, the research shows, for instance, that users are often more compelled to click on or engage with content which is inflammatory or radical. Now, let's look up the word inflammatory so that we can get a better understanding of what that means, because this is just what I was talking about a little earlier. So we're going to look up the definition of inflammatory. It says relating to or causing inflammation of a part of the body, right? And that's medical. That's wherever you know, anything that gets inflamed is somewhat infected in the body, right? So that's not a good thing. But it says arousing or unintended to arouse angry or violent feelings. So why is it that the algorithms are supporting to arouse the emotion of anger and violence in the feelings of the societies that are engaged on these platforms? We have to ask ourselves this, people, because it's something that we're here at the Network of Awareness. When I say the light is within you and all around you, and don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel, that is serving a purpose to let you know that you are everything that is and ever will be. And you cannot let these malevolent forces get the best of you. We are in a state of warfare in the society that we live in. And there's nobody that's going to come save us. All right. God helps those who help themselves. And we have to save ourselves because we have the gifts and the ability and the power of infinite possibility to do so. And that's the purpose for this podcast, is so that we understand that this inflammatory manipulation is, we're all subjected to it, but we can basically polarize it for that light to go in the better direction, in the more righteous direction, in the positive direction, instead of this angry, violent, negative feeling direction. Now, going back to the article, let me just pull it up here. It says, research shows, for instance, that users compelled to click or engage with inflammatory radical, right, content. Some believe this is the contributing to society gradually becoming more and more polarized phenomenon discussed on the Truth Shock podcast. Now, you see, that's a perfect example of a podcast that's being shared on an article. And these are the types of things that we can do to help each other grow so that we can manipulate the algorithms. So when somebody's reading this, they click on Tech Shock podcast and boom, they got the Tech Shock podcast right there at their fingertips and ready to listen to in regards to this type of content. Now, perfect example. I like that right there. Now it says, ultimately, what most worrying is the algorithms interpret such interactions to mean that you want to see more of the same type of posts, even when they're upsetting, misleading, or harmful. But this is by design, because they want us to stay stuck not only on stupid, but on angry, on sad, on depressed. And those types of conversations or presentations are the most attractive because that's all that they're pushing. I got to see this back in the late 90s, going into early 2000s. I got to see the radio stations playing good hip hop music where everybody was getting shine that had a skill set. And then slowly but surely, with people like Puff Daddy and many others, they were paying radio stations to basically, and people, I do apologize if you get to hear the dog in the background, but they were paying radio stations to play certain songs in constant rotation. So instead of the radio stations actually playing a nice plethora of different songs throughout the week, you were hearing the same song over and over and over again. And usually the songs that you were hearing over and over again was dumbing down the society, was dumbing down the generations to come. That's when we saw a big surge with artists like Lil Wayne, which in my opinion, I think he's, a subpar hip hop artist, if that. But his songs were getting played mostly on all radio networks because they were paying for that. And that was all that was in rotation. And all of the good music, all of the high vibratory music started to fade out of the radio station to where they almost became obsolete and insignificant and didn't have any real shining light on them until the internet came out. And then you had to search these people. And these people are still not in the commercial limelight like the artists that are going to keep you on a low vibration. Now, let's talk about when it comes to algorithmic manipulation, let's talk about hate speech and radicalization. It says by mistaking intrigue for endorsement, algorithms can work subtly to influence our taste and preferences. Many charities and organizations have expressed concerns about the effects that content and social media algorithms specifically can have on a young people in the long run. While radicalization is one of the most extreme consequences of spending time on social media, it's far more common that people will be exposed to hurtful comments and imagery featuring things like racism and misogyny. So consistent exposure to damaging content while individuals are still developing can have lasting effects, blasting them towards harmful attitudes, getting them involved in disinformation-rife groups, or simply numbing them to the more toxic sides of the internet. And what's interesting about this, people, is that a lot of the big tech companies, when I was doing episodes on the whammy jammy okey pokey death stick, also known as the science appliance that got a lot of people dropping like flies out here, I was hit with some major disinformation community guidelines, interruptions and flags and suspensions and sometimes terminations. The biggest one, as many of you know, if you listen to this network, is YouTube. But this is what we've come to. What's interesting is that when you listen to season 1 of the Network of Awareness, if you care to, I have a couple of episodes where I discuss the harm that these science appliance medical devices were going to do to people once they were given out to the public and authorized, which they were never authorized, right? They were only authorized on an emergency use level, but they were never technically authorized. But once I gave that information out, I was heavily targeted. And those algorithms from season 1 and how they've been manipulated are still present day affecting me, present day. That's why I keep on pushing, people. I keep on fighting the good fight because somebody's got to do it. And I'm going to get this information out as to many people as I possibly can, and I'm not going to stop. But hey, we can only get stronger together. Two minds are better than one. So let's talk about this manipulating algorithms. This becomes even more problematic when groups or individuals are able to intentionally manipulate social media algorithms in their favor by widely sharing pieces of shocking content. And you see this a lot. There's a guy that I follow and he's just sharing a lot of death. Okay. A lot of people dying with this whole situation with Israel and the Hamas. And to a certain degree, I understand it, but showing that type of imagery is not good for the human psyche. It's not good for the human psyche to constantly see suffering and to see that low vibration. It's not, but it gets heavily supported. The numbers are staggering. But when you see something that's promoted that's positive and happy, it doesn't get a lot of airplay unless it's something that's dumbed down or something with animals or something like that. But anything that's going to awaken the mind that's based on some form of truth, it's going to take a lot of effort to get that out so that the masses can be exposed to it. Now it says, because posts of most outrageous nature are bound to generate clicks and views, the algorithm is incentivized to push them to even broader audiences, meaning they get interacted with even more. In essence, this becomes a snowball effect. This is where the catchphrase that became very popular in the mid to early 2000s, between 2005 and 10, was going viral. Now, this process has been used to explain rapid use in popularity of internet personality, Andrew Tate, someone who in mid-2022 had been Googled more times than Donald Trump and Kim Kardashian. Now, one of the things I found out, and I found this out from a young man that I interviewed that went through that, what was it called? Hustlers University, or something like that. He had a program called Hustler University. And one of the things that you're supposed to do once you get into that program is to promote his videos everywhere you can to make it go viral. And then he teaches people 3 things to get into to basically to monetize and have passive and aggressive income, which is very smart. But part of the program was getting his information out there, and the algorithms were off the charts, as you all know. But of course, the man got arrested and got caught up in a lot of things. And, we've talked about that on this podcast as well, is that even though I respect him, and this is not coming from a criticism or anything, even though I respect him, I think that he also kind of misguides the youth into embracing their egoic mind instead of embracing the mind of compassion and empathy. It's more of a kind of sadist mentality. And it's live your best life, which I'm in perfect agreement with that. But it's in the manner in which it's taught, to where even the young man that I interviewed on this podcast has said that he had to catch himself, because as much as he studies stoicism and all these other things that Andrew Tate promotes, he also had to come to the awareness that he was being a bad person. And I'm not going to curse on this particular episode, but he was not being the type of person he wanted to be. And his friends kind of knew that. And he had to apologize to his friends because he was fully immersed into his ego and vanity and in the materialism, and not really appreciating the actual experience that he was able to have. Now, this talks about the Hustler University and posting content featuring him and recruiting others to do the same. And thousands of people complied, which meant that the social media algorithms were tricked into showing his offensive posts to millions, many of whom were young and wouldn't have sought that content out independently. And that is so true. Because of that algorithm, a lot of people that would never seek this information out were exposed to it. And this goes back to what I was saying about this network. There's a lot of people that may not seek this information out because most people don't want to think. Most people don't want the truth. Most people are very comfortable being in robot consciousness and being stuck in a programmed mind within this matrix. But just like Neo and Trinity and Morpheus and all the people from the Matrix, they were still freeing minds. It just takes effort from those of us that know what is, opposed to knowing what isn't, and knowing the truth and living in that truth and being an example of that and spreading that, which goes back to saying, let's spread this type of information wherever we possibly can, so we can get our numbers up and get this algorithm going for the network of awareness. Now, it also means that his content circulated widely despite the fact that he wasn't posting it himself, making his official platform bans basically ineffective. This should be taken as a real concern, with news reports of schools deciding to issue warnings to parents about Tate's dangerous videos and comments. Now, this is the thing, is that when it comes to algorithmic manipulation, it's going to work for the good, it's going to work for the bad. And it's all going to be based on interpretation, because everyone has a perspective. Everyone has an opinion. But I truly believe that the Great Awakening is happening. There's a lot of people that are searching and desiring for more, especially the younger generation. They know that a lot of these new age religions that have been, glorified for many centuries now, they know that a lot of it is some mumbo jumbo. They also know that a lot of the institutions and what they're teaching and how they're conditioning society is false. People are yearning for something real and authentic and for something true. Now, I'm going to read an article here, all right, that I have gotten from cybersecurity. And it says, does social media algorithms polarize us? Maybe not. A safer, saner social media world is possible. Former Facebook product manager Frances Hogan told members of Congress in 2021. Instead, she said leaders at the social media companies chose engagement over democracy, using algorithms that kept people glued to the site, but also angry, anxious, and ill-informed. Hogan's diagnosis of the cause of our current political dysfunction, social media algorithms, and the cure: get rid of the engagement based. So let's take a look at this article. It says that To get rid of the engagement-based ranking of content and return to displaying posts in simple chronological order has become dogma for many politicians, members of the press, and would-be change makers. Doing away with algorithms would also halt hate speech and misinformation, these groups insist. But more and more research is casting doubt on such claims. The latest comes from a collaboration between academics and Facebook parent company Meta, who set out to explore the impact of algorithms in the lead up to 2020 election. The first results from this project were published in 4 papers in June. And his name is in July. Michael W. Wagner, the project's independent report called the study's works of independent, rigorous, and ethical research. With users' consent, researchers tweak various elements of their Facebook feeds to see what effect it would have on the things like political outlooks and media diet. The interventions differed by study, but all revolved around assessing how Facebook algorithms affected users' experience. And what they found cuts to the heart of the idea that Facebook could produce kinder, better informed citizens by simply relying less on engagement metrics and algorithms to determine what content gets seen, both altering what individuals saw in their news feeds on Facebook and Instagram and altering whether individuals encountered reshared content affects what people saw on the platforms, reported Wagner in the July 28th issue of Science. But these changes did not reduce polarization or improve political knowledge during the 2020 U.S. election, indeed removing reshared content and reduced political knowledge. You see, the problem with this is that we've come to a point where manipulation has always been part of the worldly world of things and how things have been done here. Manipulation is nothing new. It's now just gone into this new digital age of technology. And what's unfortunate is that those that are bringing out the truth are suppressed. And that's why there's a decrease in content quality, because anything that has quality, that is content, is suppressed, is shadow banned, and most people don't get to see it. And we need to expose this algorithmic manipulation and how it leads to a decline of the quality of content that's available to users. Because what's interesting is that even though this network has been around for going a little over 3 years now, we haven't even hit the 100,000 download mark, which is very interesting because I've done a lot of marketing to get this out, but we haven't hit the 100,000 download mark. And we should have hit that at least 2 years ago, but other sites do. And other podcasts do. But we're not stopping. Like I said, it takes certain manipulation for these algorithms for a podcast like this can take off and go viral in one day based on the way the algorithms are being manipulated. And it's all about collective collaboration. So there's something called sensationalism, as well as clickbait and shallow content promoted by algorithms to generate engagement. I mean, we see some of the most heinous, absurd things. One of the things that I got to see early on when it came to YouTube thriving and becoming more successful was Jake Paul, right? Jake Paul, the Paul brothers. I mean, they were doing some of the most silliest, performing some of the most silliest acts and just insane behavior online that was not going to help any of the younger generation grow mentally or spiritually. It wasn't going to empower anybody. But yet these people came into prominence to where now one of the brothers is a boxer. The other one does movies and all of that. But they were doing the silliest stuff to get that clickbait. And the dumber and the more silly and the more frivolous and just plain out stupid the video was, the more downloads and views that it would get. They even have documentaries on this stuff. But this is all manipulated because you have to ask yourself, why is it that people are getting access to seeing this over and over? There has to be a manipulation in the algorithms. So these big tech companies are doing that. For example, on my TikTok page, every time I put out a video, unless I pay for more viewers to watch it or for it to be viewed by more people, it's always going to be anywhere from 200 to 250 views. And sometimes those views come quickly. And then 75% of the people that are viewing out of that 200 to 250 viewers, you can't even see who they are. So are they even real viewers or are they bots? And this is how they do me on TikTok, on Instagram, Twitter. Twitter is so political right now that I really can't stomach it because it's just too much political, radical rhetoric going back and forth. And it just promotes nothing but division. It's like Democrat versus Republican, Trump supporter versus Biden supporter, and everything in between. It's quite sad to see, but this is just the reality of the world we live in. There's been an erosion of a diversity of voices when it comes to this manipulation and this suppression. And there's been many case studies highlighting the suppression of minority voices and niche content that may not align with the big tech agenda. Bingo, network of awareness, exposing the lies. And that's the thing, is they don't like when people are exposing the lies. And you have to ask yourself, why is it that a guy that did come into prominence and was successful got hit so hard by platforms like Twitter and many others? And I'm talking about none other than Alex Jones, right? InfoWars. Now, InfoWars is still thriving, but they got hit pretty hard, right? And they took a big hit financially. And it's because of this type of censorship that they did. And censorship is really threatening content like the network of awareness and many others. For example, examination of how big tech companies censor content perceived as threat to their interests. Now, people, I just did an episode yesterday, right? And many of you, if you haven't heard it, the episode, let me pull it up here. The episode was called, Evolution of the Spirit, Letting Go of the Unnecessary. Very positive, uplifting episode, all about conscious awareness, all about self-empowerment, and just a lot of good, positive, high vibrational, thought-provoking content. I took 9 minutes and 49 seconds of the beginning of the video on the podcast from YouTube and posted it on TikTok. This is the first time this has ever happened to me. When I posted it, I got hit with a community guideline violation. But of course, they don't tell you what the community guideline violation is. They just tell you that you violated instantly. And then you have to go read the community guidelines, but there's a bunch of different things that can be a violation. But when you start to look at it, there's nothing that I posted that would even be in violation to their guidelines. So what did I do? I appealed it. I said, I disagree. And within a matter of 15 minutes or less, it came back up again. And that's when I wonder, I'm like, why did I get hit before I even got to post it? And it's because of these manipulation of algorithms. It's one of the reasons why I was compelled to put out this episode today anyway, because I'm not going to lie. It can be somewhat frustrating, even though I stay positive and I keep pushing and moving forward. There are moments where they try to get me discouraged, and that discouragement comes in really quick and then it leaves. But it does get a little frustrating and a little time consuming to even have to go through the motions to make sure that your content gets shared because of these big tech companies, because of that dark side and that agenda, that malevolent agenda to basically bring about low vibration energy to keep us deaf, dumb, and blind, and to not help us to become awakened and to live and be within this truth. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the impact on information accessibility. And I want to discuss how algorithmic manipulation limits access to valuable information, because there's a lot of real world scenarios where individuals are denied access to knowledge that could aid in making informed decisions. This is no different than how slavery was conducted in the 15, 16, 17, and 1800s, and even till present day, if you think about it, when it comes to the prison pipeline school system. But back in the days, a couple of centuries ago, people that were enslaved were not eligible to read any books. Books were suppressed. And if you were caught reading, you can get killed or punished in some of the most violent and extreme ways. All right. There's people that have been killed, had their hands cut off, had their eyes gouged out. I mean, some horrendous things that happened back in slavery times just for trying to gain information and knowledge from books. And there's just a different way of how it's being done today. Now, there's a lot of truth that gets suppressed. And this is why I say, people, if you support these types of networks, share them wherever you can. We can beat these algorithmic manipulations by making sure that the polarization goes in the direction that we want them to go in. Now, unveiling how big tech companies contribute to the suppression of truth. There's a lot of instances where information about government and corporate manipulation is intentionally hidden from the public. i.e. the okey pokey turn yourself around death stick, right? We all know what we're talking about, that science appliance, that medical device. That was probably the most biggest truth suppression that we've ever seen in modern day society within the 21st century, people. And it's still happening present day. See, these censorships of platforms are providing, these censorship platforms providing valuable information are getting suppressed. Because once people start to become awakened, the power structure no longer has power. The authority or the illusion of authority is no longer accepted. The compliance is no longer in existence. And they know this, but we have to know it so that we can overcome this oppression and start a truth revolution to where positive, high vibratory information is all that's available. And all of that negativity stuff takes a back seat. And then the negative stuff starts to get suppressed. Just like how we have to suppress our egos from getting the best of us so that we can really be in tune with our higher selves. See, there's consequences of limiting access to information that can empower individuals because there's only but so much suppression you can give. And there has to be an anomaly. Just like in the Matrix, Neo represented the anomaly to the Matrix. He was that one person that can see it all and that cannot be killed by an agent or overpowered or anything. And even at the end, Neo had to sacrifice himself to basically overcome the Matrix. And we have to make some major sacrifices and take risk in order for us to get to this truth information and also to make sure that those that we support are getting all the love and support that they possibly can get so that they can get the proper exposure and their information is not suppressed. One of the reasons why this dark age of big tech is manipulating algorithms is basically to keep people ignorant. So how do you keep people ignorant? Well, it's very easy. Just keep spreading ignorant information and make it readily available at people's fingertips at all times and constantly feed them and condition them, even subliminally condition them to just having access to information that's going to keep them ignorant. See, we have to analyze the broader impact of censorship on public awareness and understanding because the truth shall set you free. But if you don't see any information that is true and you see nothing but false, low-level dis and misinformation, then that starts to become your truth and you start to believe the illusion and you embrace all of that negative energy, thinking that is real, thinking that is true. And as the scripture says in Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20, it says they have accepted the light for darkness and the darkness for light. Now, the notion of low-level vibrations as a metaphor for restricted thought and information is becoming, it has been, I shouldn't even say it's becoming, it has been popular. It is the new norm to have low-level vibrations and restrictive thoughts. People are really not thinking anymore. There's more group thought and thinking now more than ever. Robot consciousness. Robot consciousness is thriving amongst billions of people that do not want to be unplugged from the matrix. So people, I want to thank you for listening to this episode. And I want to say my final statement in regards to this episode about algorithmic manipulation and just censorship in the digital age. I just want to recap that there's some key points we have to be aware of. That's how to battle against algorithmic manipulation. Let it work for you. Let it work for those that are bringing out truth information. Content quality decline. Let's put the truth information on the incline and start putting the low vibration content on the decline and make sure that diverse information doesn't get eroded. And there's and fight against censorship of threatening content and the impact on information accessibility. So, as I mentioned before, if you support the network of awareness, let's advocate for transparency, for truth, for authenticity, for ethical, algorithmic design. Design for us to incline with truth, with awareness, with consciousness, and to promotion of platforms that prioritize diverse voices and unbiased content. So, I invite you all my listeners, if you have any questions, I want you to share your thoughts on this topic. You can share your thoughts in the Spreaker chat room that we have. We also have networkofawareness.com where you can share your thoughts on there on the message board. And you can also send an email to ORRA at Network of Awareness. Emails are always welcome, but I want to hear your thoughts on this, people. Ask your questions, share your thoughts on this topic. I want to encourage a discussion further and the potential solutions and ways that we can address these issues and raise some awareness in this episode, and furthermore for new episodes. So if there's any episode topics in regards to this, share them and share your thoughts. And if there's any way that you know and you've figured out how to manipulate these algorithms, please share them, because I can definitely use them. That's for sure. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, and all you truth seekers, when you live in the present, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. So be present and don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel, because the light is and always will be within you. So light up the tunnel and find your way through the darkness. This is ORRA, the Informationalist from the Network of Awareness. Peace, love, and light.